On the morning of November 8, 1942, the beaches near Sidi Farouk, Algeria became the stage for a quiet turning point in modern warfare. As American infantry units advanced through the shallow surf during the opening moments of Operation Torch, they carried with them an unfamiliar device, one that most of them had never fired and few truly understood. Hidden among crates labeled classified were nearly 5,000 newly issued MUN rocket launchers, weapons that would soon earn a name destined for history, the bazooka. At the time, the soldiers wading ashore had no idea that the simple steel tubes on their backs represented a fundamental shift in the balance between infantry and armored vehicles. Within a year and a half, this modest weapon, cheap, portable, and shockingly effective, would compel the German army to rethink how its tanks were deployed on the battlefield. What heavy artillery and complex anti-tank systems had failed to accomplish, a handheld launcher costing just $25 to manufacture would achieve with devastating efficiency. The revolution did not begin on a battlefield, but months earlier at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland on May 6, 1942. That day, two officers, Colonel Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Uhl, arrived to observe demonstrations of proposed anti-U tank weapons. The U.S. Army had been evaluating British-designed spigot mortars, cumbersome machines weighing over 100 pounds and requiring trained crews to operate. These devices represented the prevailing belief that defeating armor demanded size, complexity, and manpower. Uhl, however, brought something radically different. His launcher had been assembled only hours earlier, using whatever materials could be found on the base. According to official records from Aberdeen, he had discovered a discarded steel pipe in a scrap heap that happened to match the required diameter. The aiming system was improvised from a bent wire coat hanger shaped by hand with pliers. There was nothing elegant about it, just a hollow tube, a trigger, and a rocket. The assembled officers, including Major General Gladian Barnes, head of Army Research and Engineering, initially paid little attention. The true test began when 5 separate spigot mortar teams attempted to hit a moving M3 Stuart light tank from a distance of 150 yards. Not a single round connected. The weapons were slow to aim, difficult to maneuver, and unforgiving under pressure. Then Uhl stepped forward. In his own later account, preserved in Army Ordnance Archives, Uhl recalled his uncertainty during that first firing. Wearing a welder's mask, he feared the launcher might produce a dangerous backblast. It didn't. He placed the tube on his shoulder, aligned the crude sights, and pulled the trigger. The rocket streaked out and struck the tank squarely. Within seconds, he reloaded and hit the target again. The effect was immediate. General Barnes inspected the launcher and reportedly remarked that it resembled Bob Burns's bazooka, the odd musical instrument popularized by the radio comedian. The nickname stuck. Within moments, Barnes authorized an order for 5,000 launchers, bypassing traditional development timelines. General Electric was tasked with production, and manufacturing began within weeks. By October 1942, multiple contractors were turning out 5,000 bazookas every month. The speed of the process was extraordinary, just 5 months from a makeshift prototype to mass deployment. Each launcher required minimal materials, roughly 20 pounds of steel, basic welding, and simple electrical wiring. The rockets themselves, designated MISICs, cost only $8 per unit to produce. Technically, the weapon was as straightforward as it was revolutionary. The MUN launcher consisted of a 54-inch seamless steel tube, 2.36 inches in diameter, with a total weight of 13 pounds. No heavy mounts, no crews, no complex training. A single infantryman could learn to operate it in minutes. What followed was a transformation of battlefield dynamics. For the first time, ordinary foot soldiers could realistically engage and destroy enemy tanks. German armored doctrine, long built around mobility and intimidation, suddenly faced a threat that was cheap, portable, and everywhere. The bazooka did not merely add another weapon to the battlefield, it redefined the role of infantry itself. The age of the tank hunter had begun. Electrical ignition for the early shoulder-fired rocket launcher was provided by 2 dry-cell batteries housed inside the wooden stock. Rockets were loaded from the rear of the tube and connected by a simple wire system. Once triggered, the weapon was capable of punching through approximately 3 to 4 inches of steel armor from a distance of up to 300 yards. Captain Franklin Johnson, who oversaw infantry training at Fort Benning, later described the revolutionary nature of the weapon in his official evaluation. He noted that a single afternoon was enough to teach an average soldier how to operate the launcher effectively. In contrast, mastering the Army's 37mm anti-tank gun demanded weeks of instruction and practice. Johnson emphasized another crucial advantage. A two-man bazooka team could maneuver anywhere standard infantry could without the logistical burden of heavy artillery. The bazooka's first real test came during Operation Torch, the Allied landings in North Africa, which began on November 8, 1942. Among the roughly 107,000 British and American troops involved were elements of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division, the 1st Armored Division, and the 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment. These units carried the first bazookas ever issued for combat use. What was meant to be a debut instead became dangerously close to disaster. Military historians Michael and Gladys Green later revealed that General Dwight D. Eisenhower made a shocking discovery on the eve of the invasion. The troops had received virtually no instruction on the new weapon. The launchers had arrived sealed in crates marked secret, accompanied by strict orders not to open them until the operation began. No manuals, diagrams, or training aids were provided. According to post-action reports from the 1st Infantry Division, soldiers were forced to learn how the weapon worked while already engaged with the enemy. Compounding the confusion, many of the early Mi-6 rockets had absorbed moisture during the Atlantic crossing. As a result, some rounds failed to fire at all, while others exploded unpredictably. The situation was no better for airborne troops. The 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment reported that only 7 out of the first 20 rockets fired in combat functioned as intended. Despite these setbacks, isolated successes began to appear. The combat diary of the 1st Armored Division records that on November 10, 1942, an American anti-U-tank team destroyed 2 Vichy French Renault tanks near Port Lyautey using the new rocket launcher. The report concluded with a cautious but optimistic assessment. When operational, the weapon proved effective. The bazooka soon attracted enemy attention. During the Battle of Kasserine Pass between February 14 and 24, 1943, German forces from the 10th and 21st Panzer Divisions overran US 2nd Corps positions near the town of Sidi Bouzid. In the chaotic American retreat, significant amounts of equipment were abandoned. German records indicate that 5 intact Mon bazookas and roughly 20 Mi-6 rockets were recovered and quickly shipped to Berlin for technical evaluation. These captured weapons arrived at the Wehrmacht testing facility at Kummersdorf on February 28, 1943. Detailed engineering assessments followed soon after. German analysis reports from March 1943, now preserved in the Bundesarchiv, offer a blunt evaluation. The American launcher was described as a straightforward yet highly effective infantry anti-tank solution. Weighing approximately 6 kilograms, it required minimal manufacturing complexity. Tests showed it could penetrate up to 80 millimeters of armor at a range of 100 meters. Most importantly, German engineers concluded that the design was well suited for rapid mass production using basic industrial infrastructure. Inspired by these findings, German weapons designers moved quickly to create their own improved version. They enlarged the warhead diameter from 60 mm to 88 mm, significantly increasing its destructive power. By September 1943, the result entered service, the Raketen Panzerbuchse 43, better known as the Panzerschreck, an unmistakable descendant of the American bazooka. During World War II, German records indicate that the production of the Panzerschreck reached 289,151 units. Although this figure is significant, it still lagged considerably behind American output. The American bazooka began to demonstrate its true effectiveness during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily, which commenced on July 10, 1943. By this time, USC forces were deploying the upgraded MUN-Aeon model, featuring enhanced electrical contacts and the more dependable Mi-6 Aeon rocket. One of the most remarkable instances of bazooka success occurred near Biscari in July 1943. Reports from U.S. Army Ordnance observers detailed that a team from the 82nd Airborne Division achieved an extraordinary hit on a Tiger tank, striking directly through the driver's vision slit, one of the few weak points on the heavily armored vehicle. While this shot reflected exceptional marksmanship rather than standard operational performance, it highlighted the potential of the weapon. Correspondingly, the War Diary of the Hermann Goering Panzer Division for July 11, 1943 remarked on the threat: enemy infantry equipped with rocket launchers can destroy armored vehicles at 100 to 150 meters. Tank crews must exercise extreme caution in built-up areas. Colonel James Gavin, commanding the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, noted the psychological and tactical impact of the bazooka. The weapon has instilled confidence among our infantry against German armor. In Sicily, bazooka teams destroyed 17 enemy tanks. The morale effect often surpasses the physical damage. Following the invasion, during the Italian campaign beginning in September 1943, the bazooka's role expanded beyond a pure anti-tank function. The rugged terrain, combined with narrow streets and ancient towns, provided ideal conditions for deploying the weapon in a variety of combat scenarios. The December 1943 engagement at Autotona illustrated this adaptability. Canadian military records describe teams employing mouse-hauling tactics, using rockets to create openings through structures rather than risk exposure on streets. The War Diary of the 1st Canadian Infantry Division commented, U.S. rocket launchers proved indispensable in urban engagements, effectively neutralizing fortified buildings. By early 1944, American production had surged to 20,000 bazookas per month. The new Minin model, designed for airborne operations, featured a collapsible structure and a magneto-ignition system, eliminating the need for batteries. Meanwhile, the Mi-6A3 rocket, equipped with a rounded nose, reduced the risk of deflection on sloped armor. Reports from the Fifth Army during the Italian campaign indicated that each infantry battalion now carried between 24 and 36 bazookas, making the weapon as commonplace as machine guns. The widespread adoption of the bazooka necessitated significant adjustments in German armored tactics. By December 1943, the German Army issued Training Directive 4318, which prohibited tanks from operating in urban environments without accompanying infantry. The directive also required that all buildings be cleared prior to the advance of armored units, reflecting the profound tactical influence the bazooka had exerted on both sides of the conflict. All armored vehicles were required to maintain a minimum separation of 100 meters from any structures that had not been cleared of obstacles or threats. Additionally, all German vehicles were outfitted with extended side skirts, commonly referred to as Schürzen, to improve their defensive capabilities. Tank crews frequently reinforced their machines by welding extra track segments, stacking sandbags, or applying concrete layers to vulnerable areas. The anti-magnetic coating known as Zimmerit, applied between December 1943 and October 1944, was introduced partly to counteract the threat posed by shaped charge weapons. A captured document from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, dated March 1944, highlighted the growing challenge posed by American infantry. Every infantry unit carries rocket launchers. Rapid, aggressive maneuvers are no longer effective. Advances must be deliberate, with infantry providing protective screening. By the time of the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, the bazooka had been fully integrated into U.S. infantry tactics. Among the 156,000 Allied soldiers who stormed the beaches, a significant number were assigned to bazooka teams, armed with the then-new MAU-9A model equipped with an optical sight. The hedgerow-dense terrain of Normandy, often referred to as bocage, offered ideal conditions for these teams, as the natural fortifications allowed soldiers to engage armored targets with relative cover. Initial U.S. Army reports indicate that within 6 weeks after D-Day, bazookas were responsible for approximately 12% of German tank and armored vehicle losses in the American operational sector. The after-action report from the 29th Infantry Division covering June and July 1944 emphasized that bazooka teams operating in hedgerow terrain achieved notably high rates of success against enemy armor. Consequently, German tank commanders became increasingly cautious, rarely advancing without thorough infantry reconnaissance. German industrial records shed light on the logistical pressures behind their countermeasures. The Panzerfaust Schreck, although technically more powerful with its 88mm warhead capable of penetrating up to 160mm of armor compared with the bazooka's 100mm penetration, was considerably more complicated to manufacture. Analysis of production data shows the Panzer Schreck required roughly 24 to 18 man-hours to assemble and cost 150 Reichsmarks, whereas the American Men 9 bazooka could be produced in only 2.4 man-hours at a cost of $25. By August 1944 US, factories had produced over 400,000 bazookas, while total German production of the Panzer Schreck throughout the war reached 289,151 units, leaving American output nearly double. The German Ardennes offensive in December 1944 served as a severe trial of the bazooka under harsh winter conditions. Combat interviews conducted with soldiers from the 99th Infantry Division immediately following the engagement revealed numerous instances of effective bazooka use. One notable account comes from Technical Sergeant Donald Bracken of the 394th Infantry Regiment, who reported that on December 17, 1944, he destroyed a Panther tank near Rotoreth. The rocket struck the tank's rear engine deck, igniting a fire that forced the crew to abandon the vehicle. The engagement occurred at a distance of approximately 75 yards. Throughout these campaigns, it became evident that American infantry, equipped with relatively simple yet highly effective anti-tank weapons, had gained a tactical advantage over German armored units. The combination of portable firepower, terrain adaptation, and systematic infantry coordination gradually neutralized the previously dominant German armored strategies. Extreme winter conditions imposed serious and well-documented operational difficulties on Allied forces. In the intense cold, remaining Mon-Aon launchers still in frontline use suffered frequent battery malfunctions, forcing soldiers to keep batteries inside their clothing to preserve functionality. Reports from the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division also noted that rocket propellants behaved unpredictably in sub-zero environments, altering burn rates and degrading both effective range and accuracy. Even with these limitations, battlefield records from the 18th Airborne Corps demonstrate the bazooka's continued lethality. During the Battle of the Bulge alone, American rocket teams either destroyed or rendered inoperable 89 German armored vehicles. These figures highlight the weapon's resilience and adaptability under some of the harshest combat conditions of the war. One of the most extraordinary and unconventional uses of the bazooka came from Major Charles Bazooka Charlie, Carpenter of the U.S. 4th Armored Division. According to his Silver Star citation supported by multiple eyewitness accounts and verified unit records, Carpenter modified his L-4 Grasshopper observation aircraft by attaching 6 mine bazookas to external mounting brackets. What began as an improvised experiment quickly turned into a proven combat tactic. Official 4th Armored Division documentation confirms Carpenter's combat successes. On September 20, 1944, he destroyed 2 Panther tanks near Aracourt. The following month, in October 1944, he eliminated a Panzer IV, and in November, his airborne attacks accounted for 3 additional German armored vehicles. Decades later, in 2017, Carpenter's aircraft, still bearing the original bazooka mounting hardware, was rediscovered in a museum in Austria and subsequently restored. His actions became a powerful demonstration of the bazooka's versatility far beyond its intended infantry role. Production data from U.S. Army Ordnance records illustrate the massive scale of bazooka manufacturing during the war. A total of 112,790 MUN launchers were produced, followed by approximately 60,000 units of the improved Mon-Aon. The Mini 9 model saw a production run of 26,087 units, while its successor, the Mini Aon, reached approximately 277,800 units. An experimental aluminum version, the Mi-10, was produced in limited numbers, totaling just 500 units. Altogether, bazooka production reached an estimated 476,628 launchers. Rocket ammunition production followed a similarly dramatic expansion. In 1942, output stood at roughly 2 million rockets. This figure rose sharply in 1943 to nearly 2.85 million. By 1944, production peaked at approximately 8.57 million rounds, before declining to about 4.65 million in 1945. Cumulatively, wartime rocket production reached approximately 15.63 million units. From a cost-efficiency perspective, the bazooka represented one of the most economical anti-armor systems of the conflict. In 1945 US dollars, an Monet or Menet launcher cost between $19 and $25, while an M6A3 rocket round cost $8.85. A complete combat package launcher plus 10 rockets was valued at roughly $110. By contrast, German armored vehicles were vastly more expensive. Production records indicate that a Panzer IV cost approximately 103,000 Reichsmarks, around $41,000, a Panther tank about 117,000 Reichsmarks, roughly $47,000. In 1945, U.S. Army Ordnance conducted a comprehensive assessment of bazooka battlefield performance. Their analysis concluded that the weapon's average effective engagement distance was approximately 75 yards. Hit probability was measured at 85% at 50 yards, declining to 42% at 100 yards, and just 18% at 150 yards. When equipped with the M6A3 rocket, the bazooka was capable of penetrating between 3.5 and 4 inches, 89 to 102 millimeters of armor under optimal conditions. Combat loss data compiled from First Army records in the European theater further contextualized the bazooka's role. Of all German tanks destroyed, 38% were eliminated by other tanks, 31% by anti-tank artillery, 14% by aircraft, 12% by bazookas, and 5% by mines. However, these figures likely underestimate the bazooka's true impact, as many German crews abandoned their vehicles once infantry rocket teams threatened close-range engagement, even if the tanks were not physically destroyed. Post-war interrogations of German officers conducted as part of the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey consistently emphasized the psychological and doctrinal effects of infantry anti-tank weapons. Although individual document citations are often broad, the collective testimony is revealing. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commander of German forces in Italy, stated that American rocket launchers compelled major revisions in German tactical thinking. The rapid, armor-led breakthroughs that defined early war German success were no longer viable once infantry anti-tank weapons became widespread. General Heinz Guderian, in his post-war analyses, similarly acknowledged that the growing presence of portable anti-armor weapons such as the bazooka fundamentally undermined the concept of independent armored operations that had been central to German doctrine. This evolving threat directly influenced German tank design from 1943 onward. Production records show the introduction of side skirts and spaced armor on Panzer III and Panzer IV models beginning in April 1943, followed by the application of Zimmerit anti-magnetic paste starting in September of the same year, clear evidence that the bazooka had reshaped both the battlefield and the tanks built to survive it. As the war progressed, German armored doctrine began to drift away from its original emphasis on speed and maneuver. Additional side armor was installed on later Panther G models, and engineers pursued the development of specialized infantry support variants equipped with heavier anti-personnel weaponry. While these upgrades aimed to improve battlefield survivability, they came at a cost. Increased mass and mechanical complexity gradually eroded the mobility advantage that had once defined German armored forces. In contrast, American tank designs remained deliberately straightforward, prioritizing mechanical reliability, ease of maintenance, and consistent operational readiness over technical refinement. Archival Lend-Lease documentation illustrates how widely American anti-tank weapons were distributed among Allied forces. The Soviet Union received approximately 8,000 bazookas, while the United Kingdom was supplied with around 12,000 units. Free French forces were issued roughly 15,000 launchers, Chinese nationalist troops received close to 3,000, and more than 23,000 additional weapons were allocated to other Allied nations. Soviet military records later confirmed that Red Army units considered the bazooka a capable battlefield tool, though they continued to favor their own anti-tank rifles. Over time, Soviet designers incorporated lessons learned from captured and evaluated bazookas, contributing indirectly to the development of the RPG-2. Although the bazooka's role in Europe is more widely known, its impact in the Pacific theater was equally significant. United States Marine Corps after-action reports from the Saipan campaign, covering June and July of 1944, credit bazooka teams with the destruction of 28 Japanese tanks, in addition to countless fortified positions. The weapon's adaptability was enhanced by a variety of rocket types. These included the MISX-A3 standard high-explosive anti-tank round, the MET-N white phosphorus incendiary and smoke rocket, and the MISV-A3 practice projectile. Marine units in particular came to rely heavily on white phosphorus rockets, which proved devastatingly effective for clearing cave systems and neutralizing hardened bunker networks. During the prolonged and brutal fighting on Iwo Jima, the bazooka became a staple of Marine infantry operations. Records show that the 5th Marine Division alone fired 1,847 bazooka rockets over 6 weeks of combat, underscoring both the weapon's importance and the intensity of the battlefield environment. The bazooka's relevance did not end with World War II. During the opening phases of the Korean War, American forces encountered a serious challenge when early mine-owned bazookas failed to penetrate the armor of North Korean Tu-34-85 tanks. Investigations revealed that deteriorated ammunition stocks were largely responsible for the weapon's reduced effectiveness. Rather than abandoning the system, U.S. ordnance authorities responded rapidly. Within weeks, development accelerated on a larger, more powerful launcher, the M20 Super Bazooka, firing a 3.5-inch rocket. Combat reports soon validated this solution. Marine Sergeant Robert Bennett, writing from the Busan perimeter in September 1950, described the impact of the new weapon bluntly. The first engagement resulted in an immediate kill at a distance of 125 yards. According to Bennett, the psychological effect on both friendly troops and enemy armor crews was immediate and unmistakable. The speed with which the problem was identified and resolved less than 90 days from recognition to battlefield deployment highlighted the inherent adaptability of the bazooka's simple design. At its core, the bazooka reflected the broader American industrial philosophy that dominated World War II production. Manufacturing analyses revealed that the launcher required no exotic materials or precision machining. Any factory equipped with basic welding tools could produce the launch tubes. Assembly time averaged just 2.4 man-hours per unit, and new workers could be trained in as little as 2 days. By 1944, logistical efficiency ensured that every U.S. Justiciar infantry company was equipped with 5 bazookas, while infantry battalions typically fielded between 25 and 35 launchers. Ammunition flowed through standard supply channels without requiring specialized handling or infrastructure. This approach stood in stark contrast to German production strategy. The Wehrmacht increasingly prioritized technologically advanced, high-performance weapon systems, often at the expense of manufacturability, repairability, and large-scale output. As a result, limited production capacity and demanding maintenance requirements constrained battlefield availability. U.S. Army training manuals further document the bazooka's transformative effect on infantry tactics. Prior to its introduction in 1941, American anti-tank instruction focused on weapons that proved largely ineffective against modern medium tanks. Infantrymen were taught to rely on anti-tank rifles, improvised explosive charges, close-range grenades, or even Molotov cocktails, methods that often bordered on suicidal. By the period from 1943 to 1945, the situation had changed entirely. The bazooka gave ordinary infantry squads a realistic means of confronting armored threats at tactically meaningful distances. More than a weapon, it reshaped doctrine, morale, and battlefield confidence. In doing so, it became one of the clearest expressions of how simplicity, speed of production, and adaptability could outweigh technical elegance in modern industrial warfare. During the Second World War, a fundamental shift occurred in the way infantry confronted armored vehicles. Every frontline foot soldier was introduced to a short but intensive training program, typically a 2-hour basic course covering the operation of the bazooka, coordinated anti-tank tactics, and practical methods of tank hunting. Infantry school evaluations from the period reveal that this was not merely a technical adjustment, but a profound psychological change. Before the introduction of the bazooka, tanks inspired fear and paralysis among infantry units. That reaction gradually disappeared. Reports describe a marked transformation. Anxiety gave way to confidence, hesitation was replaced by initiative, and soldiers began actively seeking out armored targets rather than fleeing from them. The bazooka did more than add firepower, it reshaped battlefield mentality. As combat experience accumulated, frontline units refined their own tactics, many of which were recorded in after-action reports. In Italy, soldiers of the US 3rd Infantry Division adapted the weapon to urban warfare. Two-man bazooka teams positioned themselves on upper floors of buildings, aiming at vulnerable tank components such as vision slits and turret rings. They moved through interconnected structures, hauling equipment through walls and corridors to avoid exposure. In Normandy, the 29th Infantry Division developed effective techniques for hedgerow fighting. Bazooka teams concealed themselves within dense bocage terrain, striking enemy armor from the flanks or rear where protection was weakest. Multiple teams often coordinated their attacks, creating ambushes that overwhelmed tanks before they could respond. Winter conditions presented new challenges, particularly for the 99th Infantry Division. Soldiers learned to keep rocket propellant warm by carrying rounds inside their clothing to prevent misfires. Snow camouflage allowed teams to approach unseen, while targeting engine compartments became a preferred method for disabling tanks through fire damage rather than penetration alone. Beyond tactical success, the bazooka proved revolutionary in terms of cost efficiency. US Army Ordnance analyses compared various methods of destroying German tanks. Engaging armor with other tanks resulted in an average loss of 2.5 Sherman tanks for every enemy tank, destroyed roughly $187,500 in equipment losses. Anti-tank guns, including weapon production and crew training, cost approximately $45,000 per kill. Aircraft strikes, accounting for aircraft losses and munitions, averaged around $85,000. By contrast, bazooka teams typically required only 5 rockets per destroyed tank, with occasional launcher losses. The total cost averaged about $50. This staggering difference, thousands of dollars versus mere tens, made the bazooka an economic as well as tactical breakthrough. For the cost of a single Sherman tank, approximately $75,000, the US Army could instead acquire roughly 3,000 bazookas and 20,000 rockets. This dramatic advantage permanently altered military doctrine. The concept of a simple, man-portable anti-tank weapon became standard worldwide. The bazooka's legacy can be seen in later systems such as the Mi-72 Law, the AT-4, the Carl Gustaf recoilless rifle, and the Soviet RPG family. More than 40 nations eventually produced their own versions or direct copies, all built on the same foundational idea, empowering infantry to counter armor independently. Today, this legacy is formally acknowledged at the German Tank Museum in Munster, which maintains a permanent exhibit on anti-U-tank weapons featuring the American bazooka. The official display text notes that the MUN rocket launcher fundamentally transformed anti-U-tank warfare. Its simplicity, low cost, and ease of use allowed virtually any soldier to operate it with minimal instruction. German forces captured early examples in Tunisia in 1943 and quickly grasped its significance, leading to the development of the Panzer in response. By the final stages of the war, the widespread presence of bazookas within American units had largely neutralized Germany's armored advantage. The weapon itself evolved continuously. Combat feedback drove successive improvements, beginning with the original Mohn model introduced in June 1942. Each modification reflected lessons learned on the battlefield, ensuring that the bazooka remained effective across varied environments and conditions. More than a weapon, it became a symbol of how innovation, simplicity, and adaptability could redefine modern warfare. The earliest American rocket launcher prototypes relied on a battery-powered ignition system and entered limited production with the MAN and later MAN-AON models in June 1943, totaling approximately 112,790 units. Early combat use quickly revealed technical shortcomings, leading to reinforced launch tubes and more reliable electrical contacts. These improvements resulted in the MAN variant, of which roughly 60,000 were manufactured beginning in October 1943. Further refinements continued as battlefield feedback accumulated. In mid-1944, the Mi-9 was introduced with a redesigned two-piece launcher and a switch from battery ignition to a magneto-based firing system, increasing reliability under harsh combat conditions. Production of this version reached 26,087 units starting in June 1944. The final wartime evolution appeared in April 1945 with the Mi-10 launcher, featuring enhanced optical sights, improved coupling mechanisms, and lightweight aluminum construction. Only about 500 units were completed before the war ended, making it the rarest of the wartime variants. Rocket ammunition development progressed alongside launcher improvements. Early Mi-6 rockets used a pointed nose capable of penetrating approximately 3 inches of armor. This design evolved into the Mi-6A3, which adopted a blunt nose to reduce deflection on angled armor surfaces, increasing penetration to roughly 4 inches. Specialized variants followed, including the Meton rocket with a white phosphorus warhead and the Meson A3 training round used for instruction and familiarization. A comprehensive study conducted in 1962 by the U.S. Army Military History Institute reached a striking conclusion. No individual infantry weapon had altered battlefield behavior more dramatically during World War II than the MAN and MEN rocket launchers, commonly known as the bazooka. For the first time in modern warfare, effective anti-tank capability was no longer confined to artillery crews or specialized units. Instead, it was placed directly in the hands of ordinary infantry soldiers. The rapid German development of their own shoulder-fired rocket weapons served as indirect confirmation of the bazooka's disruptive impact. Operational records from the German army illustrate this transformation clearly. Between 1940 and 1942, before the widespread appearance of infantry-held rocket weapons, German armored units advanced with confidence. Tanks frequently operated ahead of supporting infantry, exploiting breakthroughs while opposing foot soldiers often scattered in the face of approaching armor. Blitzkrieg tactics thrived under these conditions. By contrast, from 1943 onward, the battlefield environment changed fundamentally. Tanks could no longer advance without close infantry protection. Urban ruins, hedgerows, and forest edges became constant threats, each concealing the possibility of a sudden ambush. Breakthrough operations slowed, casualties mounted, and armored assaults became increasingly cautious and expensive. These shifts were meticulously documented in Wehrmacht war diaries, revealing how the bazooka reshaped combat behavior across the European theater. The scale of bazooka production itself reflected the peak of American industrial capacity. In March 1945 alone, factories delivered approximately 42,000 launchers and more than 540,000 rockets. This effort involved 237 subcontractors operating across 34 states. Unlike German weapons programs, which were often concentrated in vulnerable industrial centers, American bazooka production was deliberately decentralized. As a result, no single bombing raid or act of sabotage could significantly disrupt supply, ensuring consistent availability at the front. Equally important was the weapon's accessibility. Training records indicate that an average soldier could achieve basic operational competence in roughly 2 hours. Full combat effectiveness typically required no more than 5 live practice rounds. Unlike anti-tank rifles, the bazooka demanded no exceptional physical strength or specialized skills. Soldiers from diverse backgrounds could employ it effectively, further expanding its tactical reach. When compared to other contemporary anti-tank weapons, the bazooka's advantages become even more apparent. The British PIAT weighed approximately 32 pounds more than double the bazooka's weight and suffered from reliability problems in wet conditions due to its complex spring-driven mechanism, which also required considerable physical effort to operate. Soviet PTRD anti-tank rifles were even heavier at nearly 38 pounds, produced punishing recoil, and proved increasingly ineffective against newer medium tanks. Their single-shot design demanded exceptional marksmanship under combat stress. Germany's Panzerfaust, while powerful, was disposable and extremely limited in range, typically between 30 and 60 meters. It lacked proper sights and posed serious risks to the operator due to its dangerous backblast zone. In contrast, the bazooka offered a rare balance: lightweight portability, extended effective range of up to 300 yards, reusable launchers, and consistent lethality. Beyond immediate tactical effects, the bazooka influenced broader military structure and doctrine. Infantry divisions could be lighter and more mobile without reliance on heavy anti-tank guns. Logistics was simplified through standardized rocket ammunition. Training pipelines allowed civilians to be converted rapidly into effective tank hunters. Perhaps most significantly, the psychological effect was profound. Infantry soldiers no longer viewed tanks as unstoppable threats, but as targets that could be hunted. From an economic perspective, the bazooka delivered extraordinary value. Its low cost relative to traditional anti-tank systems, combined with its high battlefield impact, made it one of the most efficient weapons of the war. Taken together, industrial scalability, tactical versatility, psychological influence, and strategic effect, the bazooka stands as one of the most consequential weapons systems of World War II, permanently altering the relationship between infantry and armored warfare. The effectiveness of the bazooka during World War II stemmed from its straightforward design rather than advanced engineering. While German forces invested in highly sophisticated tanks and weaponry, the United States focused on producing weapons that were simple, reliable, and could be manufactured and distributed in vast quantities. By the closing stages of the war, nearly every American infantry squad had access to a portable anti-tank solution, reflecting a military philosophy that empowered ordinary soldiers with significant firepower and the training to employ it efficiently. Germany had entered the conflict with an unmatched concentration of armored divisions, dominating early campaigns in Poland, France, and beyond. Yet these formidable forces eventually met unexpected resistance from young American soldiers wielding steel tubes that cost less than a bicycle. The bazooka's triumph highlighted a key lesson of modern industrial warfare. Widespread availability of a functional weapon could neutralize technically superior but scarce armaments. Innovation, as the bazooka demonstrated, does not always require complexity. The most effective solutions are sometimes the simplest ones that can be produced at scale. From Edward Uhl's improvised prototype, a simple tube fitted with coat hanger sights, the bazooka evolved into a decisive instrument that contributed to the defeat of Nazi Germany, symbolizing the strength of American industrial democracy. Between May 1942 and May 1945, U.S. factories manufactured 476,628 bazookas and over 15 million rockets, fundamentally transforming infantry combat. The impact of this weapon extended beyond its physical capability. It allowed soldiers to destroy tanks from realistic engagement distances, dramatically altering battlefield dynamics. Equally significant was its psychological effect. Infantrymen were no longer passive participants at the mercy of armored divisions, but became active agents capable of challenging the previously dominant German forces. Blitzkrieg, Germany's hallmark rapid assault tactic, encountered a new obstacle in the form of small rocket teams hidden in urban ruins, hedgerows, and other terrain features. The bazooka's success lay in its combination of simplicity, practicality, and mass producibility. It could be quickly manufactured, easily distributed, and effectively operated by troops with minimal training. This approach exemplified American military strategy, leveraging industrial capacity and logistical efficiency to achieve battlefield superiority rather than relying solely on technical ingenuity or tactical finesse. In contemporary militaries around the world, infantry units continue to carry portable anti-tank systems directly descended from the bazooka concept. The principle remains consistent: empower individual soldiers to counter armored threats effectively. This idea was first proven when Lieutenant Edward Uhl launched the inaugural Bazooka rocket at Aberdeen Proving Ground in 1942, showing that ordinary soldiers could wield extraordinary power. The bazooka also stood as a symbol of democratic industry in action. It demonstrated that American workers producing simple weapons in massive quantities could surpass the meticulously engineered but limited output of German factories. Soldiers were entrusted with powerful, easy-to-use tools, turning citizens into formidable combatants. The German High Command was stunned to realize that their advanced armored formations could be stopped by a rudimentary device costing only a fraction of a factory worker's weekly wage. This experience underscored a broader truth about industrialized conflict. In a war defined by mass production, the ability to manufacture and deploy large quantities of effective weapons often outweighs the benefits of technical superiority. As displayed in countless theaters from the beaches of Normandy to Italy's mountains, from French countryside hedgerows to dense forests, the bazooka provided American soldiers with a reliable method to confront armored threats. Crafted from basic metal scraps and improvised components, it played a key role in dismantling the Third Reich, one rocket at a time, embodying a uniquely American blend of ingenuity, practicality, and democratic industrial might.